everything on mute here.
If it's bull or bear, I don't care. It's quite a rough ride, just like life. But I'm kind of patient, 'cause only time will tell. It's gonna go up, so you better stay calm. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins.
And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Crypto Crow, here with my friend Mark Moss. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Crow. Always a pleasure catching up with you. I'm stoked we could do this.
Yeah, dude. We were just, for those of you in the audience, we were just kind of chatting about like Telegram versus Twitter for communication. He's a big Twitter head, and I'm still trapped in Telegram's abyss of missed direct messages. So I really do need to get my Twitter game up. I didn't even use Twitter for the longest time for anything but like automated spam posts to help SEO for the longest time. And then once I got into crypto, I realized I had like 10,000 followers or whatever it was, or maybe it was like 8,000. I had like 8,000. I'm like, holy shit, I guess I should start using this. So I'm like, I've been trying, and now I'm over 10, like it's like 10,500 now. And I definitely feel like I need to start using Twitter more. I like the fact that I sent you a message like, I don't know, a month ago, or however long it was on Telegram. And then when I sent you a Twitter message, you got back to me in like an hour. I'm like, oh, okay. So Twitter's where it's at, and I'm missing the boat is basically what's happening.
Well, I think everybody kind of has. Sorry. I was turning the live stream on so I can keep the chat up. I was just gonna say, I think everyone has their own platform, and you got to figure out what works for you. You can't be on all of them all the time, right? Mm-hmm. But Twitter is a place where you have this conversation going all the time. So there's like little bite-sized chunks of information and thoughts. And like, I love to just like put out like whatever's in my head out there. And I love to see what's in other people's heads. Whereas Telegram's really kind of more about like one-on-one communicating or with a group. So they're definitely different, but yeah, Telegram's too much for me. The other thing is like, you know, in addition to like putting out content and whatnot, like you got to get work done, and having that constant ding, 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 ding of Telegram all day is like so distracting for me.
Oh yeah, I just turn all that stuff off. I don't even hear it, but you don't have to do it, Crypto Crow. Not everyone likes Twitter. Yeah, I like Twitter, but at the same time, it's such a toxic environment I feel people are generally pretty cool with me on Twitter. But man, like, especially if you get political or religious, just mention Flat Earth. You know, like it's like the crazies come out like zombies in the night, and it's nuts. It's like, obviously I watch Joe Rogan a lot, and I listen to, he won't even touch any of this stuff. He doesn't want to see any of it. Of course, anytime you post something, he has like 200,000 comments in like an hour, and it's ridiculous. How could you keep up? But he's always talking about the toxicity of the social circles on some of these platforms. And, I absolutely agree with everything he says in terms of that. But anyway, so what's new with you, Mr. Market Disruptors? Like, how's life? How's business? Catch us up. What's up with you?
Yeah, so life is great. I live in Southern California. I just got out of the water, just went for a surf. I got two beautiful girls. We're on summer break, so that's been amazing. Business wise, we've kind of gotten through the crypto winter, if you will. And you know, the market's been good this year, which has been really good. There's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in the space. A lot of new development. Obviously, Bitcoin, of course, continues to dominate. But one area that I've been really focused in is in the DeFi space. There's a lot of stuff going on there that's super cool. Crypto loans, right? Lending platforms, MakerDAO, things like that. So that's really cool. And other than that, you know, just been putting out a ton of content as much as I can, trying to kind of report on what's going on both on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and on the Market Disruptors podcast that I launched like 3-4 months ago.
How's the podcast been? So when you say podcast, is that like YouTube podcast or like an audio podcast?
Yeah, just an audio podcast. It's actually a separate show. So YouTube is more about me putting out content, but the podcast is just interviews. For whatever reason, my channel hasn't been super receptive to interviews. And
Mine
so
isn't
the purpose
either.
of the podcast is really to go find like the people that are building the best companies or the top investors in the space, and really to ask them the questions that you wish you could or you should if you had the opportunity to do that. And so, you know, luckily, as my platform's gotten bigger and bigger, I have access to higher level people, and there's just so much we can learn from them. I've always believed that success leaves clues, and so we want to learn from other people. And so I'm asking these builders, I'm asking these investors, and asking these like hedge fund investors or you know, crypto fund investors, like, how do you look at the market? How do you split up risk? How do you manage your risk? How do you put crypto assets into different categories? What are strategies that the average person could do to like hedge their portfolios, things like that, and just really good info that people should hear. So it's been good for me to learn, and I love to share that with everybody.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because when I think about my channel, I obviously with the exchange coming, which apparently is, you know, every week I'm like, oh, it's going to be next week, but my developers keep coming up with something else. They have they found one more thing during quality assurance testing that they have to resolve. And so likely next week, a lot of people are going to get this beta invite. And it's like, I've been so caught in this, you know, I don't know what to even talk about recently. You know what I mean? It's because I'm not sitting around reading everything there is in the crypto space. And I'm also not even reading a lot of books at the moment because I've become so just like, well, what does it matter? You know what I mean? I've been in this point of limbo where it's like, you know, whatever's going to happen, you know, the market's starting to come back a little bit, at least Bitcoin has. And I feel like I have it locked into my brain that it doesn't matter what news comes out. It doesn't matter what some pundit says or whatever. The market's going to do what it's going to do until, you know, there's that true volatility in the market with the altcoins and Bitcoin crossing over each other, and we see that true kind of blossoming. At that point, I feel like things will matter more, right? Because at that point, that's when people are truly going to decide, you know, on a 5-minute candle, hour candle, daily, weekly, what they're going to be trading and speculating on, and that's going to be based off of what projects are doing the most and being the most active and releasing the most updates and all that stuff. And until that activity really begins, which I don't see happening until, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, I don't really see a lot of that happening until $20,000 Bitcoin. And because, I mean, it could be months. It could be, who knows how long it could take it could be 6 months, who knows? But at the rate we're going, I can see this happening this year. But I don't think anything's really going to start happening in the market until that takes place. And then we've got the bag holders of the altcoin rally from 2017 and all that sell pressure. So then that competition is going to be that much more fierce because you're going to have people buying into the sell pressure of the bag holders that have been sitting tight for 2 years, which for them, kudos, because they've been holding their coins. They're not going to be, you know, tagged with, if they sell them at a profit, they're not going to be tagged with, you know, crazy high capital gains taxes and things like that. So there is some benefit to that. But, you know, it's just, for me, it's like, there's so much stuff in the news, and so many articles and all, but it seems just to be like more of the same shit that has been just coming out for the past, you know, year and a half now.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I guess it depends on how deep you want to get into it. But I think to your point, I think, we go through seasons in life. And I know for myself personally, like I hit these seasons where like I'll spend a lot of time learning. So I am reading books. I'm super involved in what's going on. And then I'll kind of take a break from that and then I'll be building. Right. So like
I'm in the building phase
I'm
right now for sure.
right. Like I'm taking content in and then I kind of got to stop that. I'm consuming and then I become a producer. And then you produce for a while, but then you want to consume again. And so I think there's natural waves. I think what would be really cool, Crow, if you were to keep us up, your audience and myself, because I'm super interested, I'm sure your audience is, but you go from like kind of reporting what's going on in the news to like actually like explaining what you're doing. Gary Vaynerchuk says, don't create content, document.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that.
Yeah, that's what he says. He says, stop creating, just document what you're doing. And I think, Crow, what you're doing is like super interesting right now. I mean, you're building in the crypto space. You're trying to navigate like US regulations and all these different things. And like, that's like really interesting stuff. And if you were like keeping us up to date with content just on that, I think that'd be great. And I know
I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, I look at, I feel like my viewers are more like, tell us what to do, Crow. Like, what do we buy? When do we sell? What projects are worth buying into? I never looked at like everything that I'm dealing with right now with the exchange and crow mining and just all of the stuff that I've got going on. It's like, I looked at the bear market as an opportunity to do exactly that, to start building, to establish my foundation in the space and then focus on everything else, moving forward. I didn't really think about that.
Well, because I think it's important, right? We all need, like, I always try to emphasize, and we all should emphasize to people to like zoom out, right? Like this is a long-term game. If we really take a look at what's going on, we're looking at a technological revolution that's going to take 20, 30 years to play out. Even the internet, which was not really the whole revolution, was just a piece of the technology, took 20 years to really start to take traction. So really we need to have the zoomed out mentality and patience. And so I know, like you just said, like everybody's looking for like, hey, what should I buy? What should I do? But if we understand what's going on with a bigger picture, I think that helps us make better decisions in the short term. So for example, like you were a fighter. So if I knew I had this fight coming up in 6 months and that was my goal in 6 months, it helped me make my decisions today of what I should be doing. And so if you were kind of reporting like, hey, here's what's going on in regulations and here's why I'm doing this and here's why the exchange got pushed back. By me knowing that bigger picture, it helps me understand what I should be doing today or this week a little bit better, if that makes sense.
No, you're right. And it does make a lot of sense. I guess there's a lot of stuff, even like in terms of just my YouTube channel alone. I am really into conspiracy stuff. I'm really into, UFOs and just all kinds of nutbaggery. Like, I love it. And I want to have people in that space, and I want to interview them, and I want to hang out with them, and I want to learn, guys like Cliff High. I've had him, but I've had Cliff High on a couple times about crypto-related stuff. I want to dive deeper into a lot of the things going on. And, it's like I've been debating, like, I want to do that, but should I start a new channel for that? Or just should I have it on my channel and just mix it up and bring people from all spectrums, but ultimately the core of it all being crypto? And those are decisions that I've been trying to figure out. Like, what do I want to do? I don't want to start a whole new channel all over again and then switching back and forth and dealing with all of that. So I don't know. But yeah,
Well, I think one, like, you're obviously Crypto Crow. So, I mean, if you just kind of branded it, just maybe step back, you could even put your name on it or whatever you could do there. But also kind of what I've done is like, I talk about investing in crypto and Bitcoin. That's my main premise. But like, I believe investing is the most important thing in the world. You'll never get ahead unless you do it. I believe crypto is the best place to invest. It's the most explosive. However, we invest with money we have left over. After we've paid our bills, after we've put money into savings, after we've taken care of all the things, then we invest with what's left over. So what about before you invest? So I started doing a separate video a week that's like more about business and success. So it's the before investing piece. So I have the investing video and then the before investing video, and they're in different playlists and I designate them differently. And so some people only want the crypto investing stuff, and that's cool, but some people want both, but at least they know and they see they're different and they can tune in for what they like, but you keep it all on one channel. So that's an idea.
Yeah. So once the exchange launches and I get things really situated, the idea is I'm going to be opening a new office location with a full-blown studio. And, some of the content that I put out on my channel is actually going to be content produced by other people that I hire. Like I want to have a weekly Cardano video, somebody that's diving really deep into Cardano and presenting a lot of that information. Because let's face it, I'm going to be super busy. And then I want to be able to come on and do interviews like this. And, I have an idea on how I want a weekly sketch video, which is kind of like a bunch of memes played out, about the crypto space, something funny every week, maybe like a Friday video where like I have a lot of cool, fun ideas and things that I think will really take to the market. But it's like first things first, I got to get all this other stuff done. So, but I definitely love what I love what you're doing. I tried doing the audio podcast. And I just, not many people seem to care about just the audio. It's like, I still have it. It's on Spreaker, but
it's I think you just need to kind of commit to whatever you're going to do. Like for example, I don't really get involved on Facebook and Instagram. Mm-hmm. Those aren't my mediums. Some people blow up Instagram, right? But it's just, you kind of have to figure out what you like.
I'm not pretty enough for Instagram, and nobody wants to see my butt.
Let's I want to jump into the market because you'd said like there's not a whole lot of new stuff going on. I think what's going on with we saw Facebook Libra, which is now kind of blown up the space, and then we've started to have like the U.S. government getting involved. We've had a lot of hearings. The president's been tweeting about it. Secretary of Treasury of the Fed tweeting about it or talking about it, and then we've seen Binance is kicking off all the U.S. people. Poloniex and Bitfinex or Bittrex, I get them all confused, are geofencing assets to U.S. people. We saw Goldman Sachs owns Circle, which owns Poloniex, is now moving offshore because they said it's too difficult to be in the U.S. So I would like to find out from you because you're building an exchange, and I guess you're supposed to be interviewing me, but maybe we can start with this topic.
We're just hanging out, brother.
But I'd like to talk to you because Binance is the largest exchange in the world, and they're kicking off U.S. people. The U.S. exchanges, Bittrex and Poloniex, have like zero volume. So what happens? Does everyone in the U.S. just pack up their stuff and go away and never trade crypto again? Or do they finally come home to U.S. exchanges and now there's liquidity there?
Well, so the way I look at it is, so I have learned quite a bit in the process of launching this exchange, and I've actually I've had conference calls with the SEC's FinHub division, and they've said some things very specifically about what they expect, where they see the market and what's going on. I think the problem with what a lot of these exchanges are having now, let's put it this way. I guess I can take this back a little bit. When I first decided to start an exchange, it was because I saw all of these overseas exchanges, or even exchanges that are kind of in the US, but they're actually structured and set up outside of the US, thinking that that's somehow going to like protect them. And so they launch these exchanges and they start trading a whole slew of different tokens, right? And they have securities, and they have what they're trying to say are utility tokens, but are actually securities. And they're trying to skirt the US system by doing everything overseas. Well, that doesn't really matter. And I knew that wouldn't matter because I know the United States government, if they have a problem with what you're doing, they're coming after you wherever you are. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, what's going to happen is at some point in the future, a lot of these exchanges are going to start getting their asses kicked once the SEC and these regulatory bodies start getting their act together and they start really learning the fundamentals of regulating this space and better understanding what they're regulating, right? And then they're going to start going out swinging that ban hammer, as I call it. So now we're starting to see some of that. The problem of what's happening is that, these big companies like Binance, they launch with these tokens that pay dividends on trade volume and things like that against, 500 other market pairs that are, a lot of them are securities. And so when you're doing that, like I know Bittrex ran into some trouble trying to get their broker dealer license because the boards basically said, well, you've been trading securities illegally now for a while. We're not giving you a broker-dealer license. And so now Bittrex wants to try and pull back and correct their mistakes and put themselves in a better position. The problem is that, and the SEC's flat out said, we like the fact that you've come to us directly and you're basically trying to figure out how to work with us from day one. It's like that whole, it's better to ask or better to beg forgiveness than ask permission mentality. And that's what a lot of these other exchanges have been doing. It's been fueled out of greed. And when you have that kind of mentality, that says a lot about your operations as well, in my opinion. That's why I don't really want to trade on any of them. The flip side to that is to do things properly, it's a slower process, because even with Crow's Nest X, I'm only going to have like 6 primary tokens, like the Bitcoin, the Litecoin, that sort of thing. Not launching with the whole slew of altcoins because nobody knows exactly how they're defined yet. The one
kind of like the Coinbase coins.
Exactly. That's pretty much the extent of it starting out. Now, there are ways that you can get around that, but I have no interest in messing with those games because it's just, to me, yeah, you can make a lot of money and then maybe, pay some exorbitant fees in the future, or you just get shut. I don't want to play those games. I have no time for that. And I'm not so worried about trying to make $100 billion a month that I'm going to risk going to jail for it. So, so what happens is a lot of these traders are trading on exchanges that are basically established overseas, and now a lot of them are trying to rein things in and say, okay, well, we're going to clean this up and we're going to launch a US based. They can't go back and say, okay, well, we started this exchange this way and we've been branded as, well, you're already doing X, Y, and Z, which is against our rulings or against our guidance. So we're not going to give you the licenses you need to do things the right way now. It's already too late. You should have came to us, or you should have been working with us from the beginning. So now they're trying to set up these new entities that they can say, well, here's a brand new entity. We're going to do this your way here. And can we get our licenses and operate? And so there's another element to that, which is, the difference between like your money service business license compared to your broker dealer license. It's much more difficult to a lot of people in the business, because we're basically we're using a third party nationally chartered banking institution. They're federally insured and all of that. So anybody that sets up an account on my exchange, they're actually going to have, they're basically setting up a bank account, and it's going to be federally insured up to like 250,000 or whatever, like any typical bank account. And they're handling the custody and all of that. And so because of that, we're leaning on them for some of the regulatory compliance that we need to operate based off the custody requirements and things of that nature. We're actually using basically a nationally chartered bank to handle all that. But that's not a broker dealer license. And that broker dealer license says, okay, you can trade securities with a broker dealer, but to get a broker dealer, there's a whole lot of stuff that you have to have in place. You have to have like a couple Series 7 traders with like, I think a minimum of 2 years experience trading on the floor, working for you. You have to have compliance officers. You have to have a lot of stuff just to maintain that broker dealer. There's a lot to it. So, that's what some of these exchanges are trying to go after now. And it's a struggle because it could take a year just to get that approved. There's so much I could go down this rabbit hole forever, man. There's so much to it. But, the idea is that, a lot of these exchanges, the people that are trading on them now, I think at some point, we're going to get projects like Cardano that become, much more decentralized, their proof of stake, all that. Once that stuff launches, I see Cardano. This was my point. And then I'll see what you have in your mind. You pushed me down a rabbit hole, Mark.
Sorry.
So the one thing that the SEC did say is that there are a lot of projects out there that might be considered securities today that may not be considered securities tomorrow. And so a big part of how they're building their workflow, their regulation, guidance, a lot of the stuff that they're trying to prepare for is that transition. That, this coin today, as it comes out of ICO or as it comes out of whatever, is considered a security. But tomorrow, it may no longer be a security and therefore be open to trade. Kind of like, and I'm guessing, and now they didn't say this, but I'm guessing it's a similar situation to Cardano. Cardano could potentially be considered a security today, because of its business model and where it's at in its development cycle. But once it's completed certain metrics in its development forecast, at that point, based off its climate, it may no longer be considered a security, and therefore that's when you might see it on Coinbase. And so that's kind of the guidance that I've received and my understanding. So
yeah, that whole regulatory piece is a big hornet's nest for sure. I guess I was kind of forecasting the business. So let's say that you get through all those hurdles, but like I was just saying, like we were both talking about kind of the market coming back, and so Binance is the only exchange that has any volume. None of the U.S. exchanges have any volume. So
I see what you're saying.
So when they, I mean, there's no trading volume. So when there's no markets, right? So when they kick everybody off, does everybody just pack up their bags and go home?
No, I think that's when they start looking for alternatives to Binance. What exchanges are? I mean, look, let's face it. If we're limited to the coins that we're able to trade, as non-accredited folks, then so what? There's still going to be a lot of trading potential, and there's still going to be a lot of speculation and a lot of profit earned. It just means that our market, it just means our market's going to be smaller for a while.
Yeah, that I tend to agree. I just don't believe there's any world where everybody just packs up their stuff and goes home and never comes back. Some people do think that's going to happen. I just don't see that happening. Yeah, interesting time. So anyway, like I said, I think there's been a lot of development. We've seen a lot of, obviously Bitcoin is being tweeted about by the president of the United States, which is really, really big.
Real quick, and to your point too, Coinbase is a U.S. exchange. They have significant volume. But one of the differences is Coinbase is a Fiat on-ramp. So, Crow's Nest X is also going to be a Fiat on-ramp.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's a big difference because people, especially newcomers, they're not using these exchanges that are crypto to crypto because it's more complicated. And they're thinking, well, if I'm going to use this Fiat on-ramp and then have to transfer my crypto to this place to trade whatever the hell it is, it's a lot easier for people to be able to use a Fiat on-ramp, which most of these exchanges are not because they don't have the infrastructure in place to cater to that in the U.S.
Yeah. Interesting.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
No, I don't know if you want to answer this. I don't want to keep pushing you down this rabbit hole, but I believe in a future where, I believe in a world where the government has competition for money, right? And so we have stable coins we could use, asset-backed coins, Bitcoin, etc. But they're going to do everything they can to choke that down, right? They want to control the on-ramps and off-ramps, as you say. Coinbase is an on-ramp, off-ramp. So, and that's where even when you look at the testimony in Washington, right, that's what they're talking about. Like, we control the on-ramps. So at some point, in order for us to truly be free, because Bitcoin, cryptocurrency is meant to be permissionless, right? So in order to open up a bank account, you have to go through all this crazy paperwork to get permission to have a bank account. And you have all these people in the world that can't get permission to open a bank account for any number of reasons. And so for crypto to really become free, we need to get rid of that permissioned system. And the only way to ever do that seems like to have a truly decentralized exchange that doesn't require that. And so you building an exchange, I'd be curious to see what you think about that.
So this is my perspective on that. To own Bitcoin is permissionless. And you can obtain Bitcoin without having to get permission. What you can't do is trade it. So if you're trying to speculate on its value by buying and selling it and trading it with other people, then yeah, that needs to be tracked, just like any other stock or anything else. If anything, it's far more permissionless than an Apple stock. You can't just send somebody a share of Apple stock, right? But you can with Bitcoin. Now, the other level of that is if I'm just your, James at the water cooler, as Crypto Kirby says, I just want to go into a Fiat on-ramp. I want to throw down my credit card, buy some Bitcoin, and I'm going to hold it for a while. Well, the government wants to know that that's the case. In the same way as if you were to set up, and the fact that you can even do that yourself without a broker, without a financial planner or a stockbroker or whatever, and you can do that without, going through, it's so much easier for an end user to acquire Bitcoin or a lot of these cryptocurrencies. So To exit your position into cash is the other gateway, right? But I believe there is going to come a day when that's not even going to be the goal. There's going to be a day, someday, when you holding that Bitcoin and converting that Bitcoin into another crypto for your daily, whether you're paying your bills or you're paying a car note or whatever. I think there's going to come a day when you're not going to be converting that Bitcoin back into fiat. The only reason that's in question today is because we're still in crypto infancy. And so we're not getting the same use. We're looking at everything from this fiat mindset. We're just touching our toe in this crypto pool. Once this crypto pool has taken over the fiat mindset, it's no longer going to be about, well, I'm going to accumulate as much Bitcoin as I can, get my cash out of my, my off ramp, and then go pay my car note. And so it's at that point that that Bitcoin truly becomes permissionless, because you're not going to be getting in and out of it through fiat currency anymore.
Right. But you probably will still need to exchange it for another crypto asset.
Right. I do think so.
But I believe in the same as you. I actually tweeted the other day. You would know if you were on Twitter. No, I tweeted the other day and I said, because someone said, hey, when Bitcoin hits 50,000, what are you going to cash out? What are you going to cash out and buy? And I said, imagine believing in Bitcoin so much that you're going to hold all the way to 50,000, and then you're going to want to trade it back for fiat. Like how you're going to have enough confidence to hold it that long, and then all of a sudden, but I'll take fiat currency.
That's just the speculative mindset of it, though, because you're thinking, okay, I'm aware of the cycle. I'm aware now of what the potential drop is. I'm aware of, all these different variables to the price action in Bitcoin. So if you're riding that wave all the way up to 50,000, chances are it's going to correct. And we're going to have this huge voice, this collective voice of everybody saying, oh, well, we're just like the last bull rally, it was like, how high can it go? And every day it was a new high. And then when it peaked, it turned around quick. And so people are saying, look, I can sell this Bitcoin at 50,000, even if it reaches 60 and then drops 85%, I'm buying back in cheaper. Wow, I've just, quadrupled my holdings for the next cycle. And I think we're going to continue to have these cycles until Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space is more widely regulated, adopted, and used by the general public.
Yeah. So we're in a really, really interesting time. I know one thing you've always liked to talk to me about is because I'm a macro guy. So I love to look at the geopolitical events going on in the world. And we're at this really interesting time right now, a very transitional time. I believe in 50 or 100 years, history books will be written about this period in time right here. And they're going to look at this and go like, wow, like, let's study this. Like, what the heck was going on, right? We are basically, for 5,000 years, we've seen gold, a real asset, being used as money. We're 50 years into this experiment of fiat currency. We've basically created, several $100 trillion of money out of nothing, which has created like enormous prosperity. But it's all falling apart like super. I mean, it's been falling apart, but it's starting to like really escalate. And so it'll be interesting to see how Bitcoin having it's an alternative. It gives people an option to opt out of the existing system where we didn't really have that before. I mean, sure, we could have gone back to gold, but I think it's going to really escalate that. And so when Bitcoin gets to 50,000 or 100,000, it might be different. And so, like, for example, in Venezuela, 15 years ago, they had a really good economy. Obviously, most people know today their economy sucks. And you could be a trillionaire in Venezuela, and that means nothing. And so when Bitcoin is worth, $1 million, it's probably because $1 million is worth zero, or whatever. So that's one way to look at it.
Isn't Bitcoin? Oh, no, I'm thinking of Zimbabwe. I'm like, isn't Bitcoin like 80 grand, on like local Bitcoin markets? And I think it's Zimbabwe. I don't think it's Venezuela. I could be wrong.
So I see someone said, you haven't convinced me that it's normal for people to want to sell at 50 to buy back cheaper. Now I'll let me address that. So first of all, I've been an investor for a long time. I've studied all the markets. I can tell you that it is not, nobody has been able to predict tops and bottoms. It doesn't happen. You can get lucky once, sure. It doesn't happen. The best investors in the world have not been able to do that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the stock market, because there's a lot of data there, if you look at the returns, the average returns, let's say over like the last 30 years, don't quote me on these exact numbers, but roughly over the last 30 years, you have about an 8% return. If you sat out the best 20 days over that time period, your returns are cut in half. If you sit out the best 30 days, you have zero returns.
I thought it was
30 days out of like 20 years. And so what happens is the best days are usually right after the worst days. And so what happens is, trying to time the market, it's just not possible over and over. I do believe, you can play little bits of swings. So my perspective would be for that comment specifically is, let's say that I want to own 10 Bitcoin when it gets to 100,000 or whatever, right? But I believe it's going to get to 100,000. So maybe I'm going to buy 20 Bitcoin today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start selling 10 of those Bitcoin at 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, et cetera. But I'll still end up with my goal of owning the 10 Bitcoin. So that might be one way. It's a layered out approach kind of a thing. So anyway, I do believe in Bitcoin, and as a macro guy, again, we're seeing this phenomenon, man. And just 2 days ago, the Chinese dropped their peg against the U.S. dollar. So it was 7 Chinese dollar to 1 U.S. dollar. And, there's been this currency war. Well, really, it's been a trade war, and now it's a currency war. And we had President Trump tweeting about Bitcoin, and all these people trying to protect the U.S. dollar. And Trump actually said in his tweet that the U.S. dollar is stronger than it's ever been, which is a complete lie.
right.
And you have all these countries fighting over these currencies. And so 2 days ago, China dropped the peg, and it really devalued the price of their currency, and all the rest of the currencies devalued, which pushed the U.S. dollar up high. The biggest move we've ever had in history. And that's super scary. The markets are really, really fragile right now, and gold and Bitcoin pumped. Gold's gone up from 1,200 to 1,500 in just like a month. And for Bitcoin guys, that doesn't seem like a big move, but if you understand the gold markets, that's massive.
But the thing of it is China has a significantly higher sum of Bitcoin than I'm sure the U.S. does. I mean, for them to do that, they could be like, okay, I'll shave a little fat off of here, but I'm getting significantly bigger over here, and they could be privately laughing. I mean, that I don't know, man. Like, when it comes to the politics and all of that, like the U.S. dollar and the inflationary system, the Fed, all of it, it's like the biggest Ponzi scam on planet Earth to me. And a lot of these currencies are the same way.
Yeah, for sure it is. And so, but it's important to understand that. So when you understand history, then you can kind of predict the future. And I actually just did a 2-part video series on my YouTube channel. And I looked at like the world reserve currency. So the US dollar is the world reserve currency right now, but it hasn't always been. So since like the 1400s, we've seen it gone from Spain to Portugal to France to Britain and then to the United States. And what I did is I really broke down the transition from Britain to the United States back in the early 1900s, because it's important to understand how that took place, because most people think there's like this event where it happens, but it's not like that. It ends in a whimper, not with a bang, is what I said. And really it was a course of about 20 to 30 years where the US dollar took over power from the British sterling. And so we're starting to see that same process happening today. And a couple of big notes on that is the US dollar is the reserve currency. So what that means is that all the countries in the world have to settle in US dollars through the New York Fed every day, where they use the SWIFT system, the wire system. And so you guys have all heard, right? The US is like, oh, sanctions against Russia, sanctions against Iran, sanctions. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is they're basically kicking people out of the financial system, right? And so that's really bad. If you're a country that has these sanctions imposed against you, it's really, really difficult. It's really bad for that. But what happens is it's like having a party, and you kick so many people out of the party, eventually you're the only one left at the party. And that's what's been happening. So the United States has been kicking so many people out of the financial system that they're starting to find alternative ways. So in 2015, our enemies, China, Russia, and Iran started trading oil outside the US dollar. So that was a really big move, 2015. And that's continued to escalate. What do you think all these wars in the Middle East are going on? The war in Syria is about oil because of Russia and Iran and Syria and the pipelines and whatnot. So anytime the US dollar is threatened, we go to war to protect that dollar because that's our power. But it's important to understand, like I said, this 20 to 30 year process when the US took over from Britain. So now we can see the same process happening right now. So our enemies, China, Russia, Iran, started working outside the US dollar. Things started escalating. But the big piece that's really starting to escalate things now is at the beginning of this year, a new SWIFT system was created called Instex. And SWIFT, again, is how the United States moves the money around the world, how everybody participates. And Instex was created to challenge that. What's interesting is it wasn't created by our enemies. It was created by our allies. It was created by the EU. It was created by Germany, France, etc. And just in June, at the end of June, so about a little over a month ago, it went live. So now we have our allies, the EU, Germany, France, etc., our allies working with our enemies, China, Russia, Iran, etc., all working in an alternative financial system outside the US dollar.
What is this alternative financial system?
It's called Instex. It's called Instex. So the whole
I don't know
world.
What that is.
Well, it's SWIFT. So SWIFT is if you ever go to the bank and send a wire, you use SWIFT. You have like a SWIFT code,
like a Western Union type thing.
No. If you go to your bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whatever, and say how I want to send a wire, and you have to put down the information. If most likely you've seen this if you sent an international wire, but you have to write down a SWIFT code.
Okay.
SWIFT is the system of how they moved money internationally. This is what, the XRP army hopes that XRP is getting rid of SWIFT. It's going to replace SWIFT. A bunch of people from SWIFT have gone to go work for XRP, et cetera. So SWIFT is the system how money is moved. It's the wire transfer system that we have today, but it's controlled by the US. And so they've created another one called Instex. But now instead of that being for the US, it's for the EU.
Gotcha.
So now all this money is being transferred between all these countries outside of the US financial system, outside of the SWIFT system. So what it does, if you guys saw like California Rep Brad Sherman, he said, we need to make it illegal for US citizens to own cryptocurrencies. You remember seeing that? The bald-headed guy with the glasses?
I hate that guy. I hate him.
Yeah, everybody hates that guy, right?
He loves to hear himself talk.
We need to make it illegal for U.S. citizens to own cryptocurrencies. And he went on to say why. And you have to understand what he said. He said the reason why
the people that are paying for all my campaigns are going to lose control.
Well, but what he said is that he said the reason why is because people believe it undermines the U.S. dollar, takes the control from the U.S. dollar. And he said what happens is it limits the U.S.'s ability to do sanctions on countries like Iran, called them out specifically. Okay. So they're seeing this, they understand this. And Iran, if you're Iran, what are you doing? You're like, oh, really? That takes away their power? Well, great. Maybe we should start Bitcoin mining, which they are, right? We've seen Iran is mining Bitcoin now. And so all these things are being done. It's a war against the dollar. That's why Trump is tweeting to say that the US dollar is stronger than it's ever been. That's why now, 2 days ago, China devalued the currency, and now it's all over the headlines that he's labeling them currency manipulators. And this is the whole battle. Now, without getting into the whole politics of what's going on, the reason why this is important for us as Bitcoin people, as crypto people, is because we understand the legacy financial system is crumbling right before our very eyes.
Exactly.
And what is coming next? Okay. That is the question that should be on everybody's mind. You can either wonder what happened or you can be a part of what's happening. And if you want to make money and survive this and thrive through this, you need to understand where we're going. And like I said, just like we read history of how the transfer from Britain to US went, people are going to read about this transfer. And I believe it's going to go to digital currencies. And that's why it's really, really massive.
I love listening to you talk about all this stuff because I don't even need to watch the news or any of that shit. I'll just listen to you for an hour and I'll be all caught up with the world.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. And I think what's going on, we have, so another thing that's super interesting is the governments, when they want to raise money, when they want to go into debt, they sell bonds. Right? And so typically like, hey, Crow, will you loan me money? You're like, well, maybe. How much are you going to pay me back? What's the interest? And you would want more. The more riskier it is, the more interest you're going to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I give you like, hey, I'll give you a house that I own at 90% LTV, you'll probably give me a really low interest rate. If you're going to invest into like a startup that's super risky, it's going to be really high, right? But what's happening is now is all these people are loaning money to these countries, buying their bonds, and actually paying them to borrow their money. Wait, what? You mean they're loaning countries money and instead of receiving interest, they're actually paying them to borrow their money? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. This is called negative interest rates. All right. So that means that instead of when I loan you $100 billion, I'm not making 1% on that or 2%. You're actually charging me 1%. I mean, does that sound ludicrous? Well, let me tell you how ludicrous this is. Just this week, over half the sovereign bonds, the world countries, the bonds of the world, half of them are negative yielding. Over $15 trillion of sovereign debt is negative yielding. That means that's $15 trillion that's literally worth less than zero.
Oh, I don't understand the point of that. Like, who's buying that shit? Is that like because of the...
No one's buying it. No one's buying it. So a country, most of the countries, anyone in the EU, for example, Germany, Russia, France, whatever, they say, France says, hey, I need $100 billion. So we're going to create a bond. Other investors need a place to put their money. So they buy these bonds. Now, typically you buy a bond and it pays you interest. But now today they're buying bonds that aren't paying interest. As a matter of fact, they're losing their money. Why would you do that? Well, you probably believe that, well, I know I'm going to lose 2% on my money to give it to them, but if I hold it on my own, I could lose 30%. Losing 2% guaranteed may be better than my option of losing more. That's where we're at today. This has never been seen before.
I mean, unless you're trying to write off against your other gains, I mean, I don't really see the point of it.
But that's what's going on. Half.
Are you saying because of the devaluation of the dollar, like because of inflation, if I hold it over a certain period of time, the devaluation of that dollar is significantly higher than if I were to buy bonds? I'm not talking about
devaluation. That's a whole nother separate topic.
Oh.
What I'm talking about is right now the U.S. bond is like one of the only countries that still has a positive yield. I think it's like 1.6%. So part of investing is always to have this diversified portfolio. So you hear about, hey, put money into stocks, put money into bonds, put money into real estate, right? You hear that.
Right.
Well, if I put money into stocks, well, I hope those stocks go up in value. If I put money into real estate, I hope there's cash flow. Maybe the real estate goes up in value. If I put money into bonds, I know there's a guaranteed yield. Now, there's government bonds. There's also corporate bonds, right? So corporations give bonds. That's debt as well. So I could buy a bond in a company that pays me 5% interest. I could pay a bond in a company that pays me 2%, 3%, 5%, whatever interest. And they rate these bonds. They have like A-rated bonds. They have junk bonds. Junk bonds are more risky and they pay higher interest as they should, right? That's what bonds are. They're buying debt that pays an interest. But the United States is only paying 1.6% on their government bonds right now. The rest of the countries, they're paying less than zero. They're taking your money to hold it for you.
Right.
So anyway, we're in unprecedented times. It's accelerating super, super fast. $15 trillion of money is sitting at negative interest rates. The currencies are racing to the bottom. I mean, 2 days ago was the biggest drop we've seen in history. And if you want to keep piling stuff on, I mean, they say in the next 2 years, the United States won't even have enough tax revenue income coming in to pay the interest on the debt.
See, that to me is bullshit. Because every damn thing you do is taxed to hell and high heaven. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, but it's taxed different ways, right? So all those taxes go to different areas. So, for example, the sales tax goes to your local municipality, right? My property tax goes to the state, right? Every tax goes somewhere different. You have your federal tax, right? And then you have all the other taxes. And you're right, everything you do is a tax. Going to the DMV is a tax, but the tax revenue, the income won't even pay the debt, and that's at zero interest rates, right? Imagine if it actually had a real interest rate. We have this massive problem with these baby boomers. With the largest segment of the population, and not just the United States, all the developed nations, the West, as they call it, Europe and Japan and China, the US, et cetera, all have these aging populations, largest segment of the population. And in the next 5 years, all the revenue that's collected will go just to the entitlements paying the old people, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, et cetera. All the revenue will go just to that. Well, what about defense? That's the largest. That's the largest thing. What about all the other programs? Like, how does that get paid? And we can't even pay the interest, right? This is all coming together in the next couple of years. This is all escalating really, really fast. It's all happening right before our very eyes. And so anyway, I think it's super interesting.
It's interesting. But it's also scary. And the thing of it is as long as I'm holding Bitcoin, I'm not too concerned for myself, because that's just the way I see it. Like, you know, I can go anywhere in the world and I know that I have value. I have something of value anywhere in the world. And yeah, you can take US dollars as well, but I believe that the value of my Bitcoin is going to continue to rise over the next 20 years. The US dollar sure as hell isn't. I mean, it's there needs to be somebody needs to come in and shake the Etch-a-Sketch. Like, and draw new lines, because just where we're at right now, it's I mean, on a global level, really, it's just they're, you know, and I've said this before, and some people are like, oh, you're a conspiracy nut, you're Looney Tune, or you're a, like, I have talked before about this whole New World Order thing, and I've had this whole, you know, people that hear it, and you could spin it in a bunch of negative ways. But to me, I'm thinking, if there was a way to unify the globe and share a currency, share resources, share, you know, and just I don't think it'll ever happen. But if there was a way to do that, I feel like we'd be able to get so much further. And when I say so much further, I think like in terms of space exploration and just everything that we're doing. Are you talking to me?
No, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we know this because of history.
Right.
So we can look back into 17th to 18th century, when the whole world got onto a unified payment system, on a unified gold system. So gold was used for a long time, but it wasn't until the late, like I said, 17th, 18th century, where we saw everybody use the exact same weighted gold coin. And once everybody used the exact same currency, then trade could happen freely.
Right.
And once trade happened freely, the world flourished. It saw several hundred years of the most advancement, the most flourishment it had ever seen.
When was this? I didn't even know that this happened.
Oh yeah, like I said, in the mid-century, like, you know, if you study from like 1500 like to 1700, like that period, couple hundred years right there. And so, like I said, gold had been used, but every country had like their own minting of a coin. And so you never knew what that coin was worth, but everybody got into a standardized minting. So every coin was produced exactly the same, so they could be interchanged. And so that's exactly so we know that works. And so what you're saying, you believe this will be true, and it will be, because we've seen it before. And you know what the nations are worried about is they think they need to control trade. Nations don't trade. People trade.
Right.
People trade. All nations do is impede that. All they do is block that. And so if we all use the same money, and now with technology, the internet and whatnot, we could all be trading freely with each other, and we'd see massive prosperity.
And I think so too. And I think I put things in a perspective of, you know, I'm a big sci-fi head, and I I'm all about space and the exploration of space and what else is out there. And I'm like, we're never going to get anywhere for as long as we're divided as individual nations. Like, we're never going to get anywhere if all of our resources are research and everything. I mean, we're constantly fucking with each other, and for what reason? It's like, oh, well, this country has this resource, that country has another resource. And it's like, who cares? Like, why can't we all figure out a way to just, it's like everybody's trying to be more powerful than the other out of fear of this or fear of that. And someday, there just needs to be a reset. I mean, everybody's so corrupt, everybody in power, nobody gives a shit about the people whatsoever. It's all about their own fat pockets and making sure their rich whore of a trophy wife has a new Gucci bag. It's like everybody is so self-serving and like in all of the politics and everywhere. In every country, and it makes me sick to my stomach because it's like you look around and it's one of the big reasons why I just love crypto, because I do believe that there's going to be a time when crypto changes everything, and hopefully that is the one thing that acts as the Etch-a-Sketch, like that just shakes the shit out of it and we can start over, because I'm disgusted by so much. It's probably one of the reasons I'm just kind of like, oh my God, I don't even want to go to work today.
I agree with you on a lot of that. I think I agree with you on a lot of that. The one thing I think that we probably will never see everybody coming together and just getting along. Mm-hmm. It's just not human nature. So like you talked about the corruption and all those things, and that's because that's human nature. And you're always going to have the person at the school, the PTA or the homeowners association, or there's always going to be somebody who's going to want to try to control things. Mm-hmm. Right. And so eventually it gets so exaggerated that you need that reset, like you're saying. And I agree that we do. But like eventually it just gets back to the way it was. And like people just don't like people. Like, we have like tribalism and whatever. So I don't know if there's like this utopia where everybody just magically gets along.
One thing you can do on the blockchain, international voting campaigns. There's so many different things that you can do to kind of, make the people the voice, like truly the voice on every issue. And with the internet, with the technology we have today, we don't have to be doing backroom deals. We don't have to be doing backroom negotiations. Bring the people in on things. They don't want to do that because then what power do they have? I don't know. I don't know enough about politics other than I just feel like just about everybody involved at some point either, I've said this before, people get into politics wanting to help the world. They leave politics having ruined it because they just, once you get in and you start learning how to play the game, you start selling your soul a little bit here and there because you're thinking, well, if I agree to take this a bad thing, then it'll empower me to do this one good thing. And before long, you're just doing all the bad shit, and you're fueling your own pockets, and you're corrupted. You've lost your soul, and then you retire.
Well, I think the problem is once you start getting into Bitcoin deeper and deeper, then you naturally start getting into kind of more libertarian views because you really start to understand like human incentives. And so the problem is that we're all different. And the reasons why I do things are different than the reasons why you do things. And so when you try to centrally plan and centrally control people's lives, you can't do that because we're not all the same. We're all different. We all want something different. And so that's why it never works. And I think the more they try to control, the more they try to centrally plan, the worse things get. Because what happens is, I don't want that. So then you have to force me. So everybody has a win-lose deal. What we all want is a win-win deal. But it forces us all into a win-lose deal where I have to lose on a deal for you to get what you want. And so it just doesn't work. And so ultimately, like I said, if you lead back to libertarian views where it's like less government, smaller government, more personal freedom, more personal responsibility, and let me live my life. I don't want to be told what I can do, what I can't do, what I can put in my body. Like, who are you to tell me what I can put in my body or what I can't put in my body, right? I mean, that's like that's like the biggest violation we have. So
I think to an extent, now you start getting, when you talk about something like that, when I see like Joe Rogan sometimes like, oh, we should just legalize all drugs. I don't necessarily believe or agree with that because I think like if a drug, especially psychedelics, things like that, if it causes you to inflict harm potentially on other people, that needs to be not okay. You know, like weed, yeah, nobody ever runs out and bites the faces off other human beings because they smoke.
Dude, I mean, come on, Crow. I'm sure you've seen plenty of barroom brawls in your day. Alcohol is probably the worst one there is.
I've been in quite a few. Like I get it. I've always been the brunt of those. The people get drunk, they get their liquid courage after midnight. They all want to target me at the end of the night because I'm the biggest guy in the room. And it's like, yeah. I get that. Alcohol is like probably one of the worst drugs out there because it's, you know, like it is an example of what would happen on a much grander scale if all drugs were legalized. You know,
well, I don't know. I think whatever the government does, whatever war they wage fails. I mean, think about it. In the 1970s, they had pretty much no terrorism. There was the one Iran, plane hijacking. The government waged a war on terrorism, and look at terrorism today. The government's waged a war on poverty. Look at poverty today. It's more poverty than we've ever seen. The government waged a war on drugs. It's spent $1 trillion, and drugs are a bigger problem than they ever have been. It doesn't work, right? They spent $1 trillion on the war on drugs, but yet we have private pharmaceutical companies making hundreds of billions of dollars that are putting people into heroin addiction every single day.
Right.
So I think they could end all the violence. And I live an hour from the Mexico border, so I see this a lot more. But they could end all that cartel violence overnight with a stroke of a pen. All these kids, I read about a kid at a party, and he took it was like some cannabis pill, but it was laced with fentanyl, and he died. They could end all that overnight. All the violence. They could take that $1 trillion they're spending, take a fraction of that and put it into education and treatment. They could let half the prison population out.
Well, and that's the thing. They spend no money on, the argument to the whole legalizing all drugs is the fact that the reason why people begin into these drugs to begin with is because of the pain of their lifestyle or the pain of their, people are a product of their environment. So people that grow up in areas, that are poverty stricken, or they're more likely to suffer from this kind of abuse or that kind of abuse, and that affects them long term. And as they continue to get older, then they start to experiment with things that take them out of that mental hell. Right. And so, by starting there with educating and helping the populace, grow and become more useful and whatever that, you get where I'm going with this, that there would just naturally be less drug use overall. And then, you would have less crime overall, less victims that are, it's this cycle. But honestly, I feel like it's a whole other thing, really. But it's not a whole other thing. And I put a tweet out about this the other day. Didn't we fund the Al-Qaeda? Didn't we fund and train them to help fight Russia at one point in the 80s or something? Yeah.
All the terrorists.
Yeah. We have a part in creating all of these, creating our own enemies. Have you seen that show, The Boys, yet on Amazon Prime?
No.
Oh, you've got to watch the show, dude. It's basically a superhero show, but this company, in this show, it's not for kids. But this company basically creates these superheroes. They have this chemical that they use, they inject in babies and gives them superpowers. And because they want to be, it's this corporation, right? So all these superheroes are basically, they work for this corporation, and they basically they secretly create their own enemies so that the government has to bring them into the military fold and be funded to fight these enemies that nobody but them could fight.
Right, of course.
It's almost the same damn situation for the most part. We're creating our own enemies anywhere we want them to be so that we have a reason to go and invade and take their shit.
Yeah. The reason why this is all connected, and I know this sounds far-fetched for a lot of people that aren't really that involved, but I put out a tweet about this the other day with a little bit more facts. But the reason why this is all connected is because every problem that we have, every social problem that we have, all boils back down to the money. Mm-hmm. Because we have a fake money supply that's consistently counterfeited by the U.S., and our value is stolen away from our savings. It has corrupted everything, and every problem we have can really be traced back down to the money. So when you start talking about Bitcoin, you start talking about social issues, and you start talking about terrorism, you start talking about drugs, because they've all come from that. Where does the government get $1 trillion to create a war on drugs? They printed it. They printed it. If we had a sound money supply, they'd never have $1 trillion to go create this fake war on drugs, right? So like, where they talk about creating terrorism, how did they fund Al-Qaeda? With fake money they counterfeited. If they couldn't counterfeit money, we wouldn't, like, you know what I mean? Everything boils back down to that. And what's interesting is when you look at these people talking about why cryptocurrency should be stopped, the two narratives they have: one, it funds terrorism, and two, it's for drugs. Okay, well, terrorism, as you said, the government is the one supplying weapons and training. The Obama sent $400 million of cash, green cash on pallets to Iran in the middle of the night. Like, they're the ones funding terrorism, not us.
Right.
So I mean, they're dropping bombs every single day in the Middle East, making people want to come do terrorism. Like, our little transactions are not funding terrorism. The United States funds terrorism. So that's one. And the other one is drugs. And again, like I said, I mean, they could end that with a stroke of a pen overnight. Overnight, it could be done. So, anyway, we could go on and on and on, but I think it's important to understand these narratives, because that's what they're combating us with. And we have to understand and see through that so we can kind of combat it.
Natasha, I'm sorry. I'm really not buying this BS talk. It's not BS talk. It's fact. Natasha, look it up.
Which BS part?
I don't know if she's talking about what's happening in chat or what we're saying. So, but yeah, like it's.
Which BS part? Let's address it.
Yeah.
Put it in the chat. I'm not really buying this BS talk.
And I'm not sure who Kent is, but I swear I did not pay him to be in my chat.
Yeah. Crypto Chain says I showed the middle finger to the viewers. Sorry. What did I do?
Bad man.
What did I do?
I don't know. I didn't catch it.
Do we want to take some questions?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I mean,
I think she's talking about how you all talk in circles about nothing. We've got some trolls in chat. That's funny. About the government and drugs and terrorism. Yeah, Natasha, look it all up. This isn't shit we're making up. What was the movie that came out in the U.S. recently with Tom Cruise? I mean, it was basically a fact. It was a movie about how he was moving what was it, heroin or cocaine for the CIA.
No, that's the real story.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, when we were both kids, Oliver North was in the news. It was the Iran-Contra.
Right.
He was running cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. to sell it, taking the money to go buy weapons to send to Iran that were fighting the Contras in Nicaragua. That's fact. That's story. This is not some made up thing. Just recently, what was going on in Syria with ISIS, and the U.S. used ISIS, and then now the ISIS is coming against us, just like Al Qaeda with Iraq. So this is not made up. Sorry that you've never heard that before, but like Crow said, do a little bit of research and you'll see that it's all true.
Yeah, this isn't all made up. So she's from Russia, so I don't know if that means anything. I was saying we don't need a government.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Who knows? I go back to the libertarian, which is like we need someone to organize, but they need to have limited powers.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be telling me what I can and can't put in my body.
Right.
They shouldn't. Now, we need someone to protect us from countries trying to overtake us, right? Someone to organize things like that. But like, come on, really? Like, you have to tell me every little single thing I can do with my life? It's just way too involved.
You made a really good point, though, about what would, like my question, you said something like, if we weren't able to just print all the money we wanted for a lot of these bullshit wars, like, would there be so many wars? And,
no, there wouldn't.
Yeah, well, and so a part of me does wonder, like, I know that a lot of wars are spawned specifically because it helps the U.S. economy. Like, that's just kind of the nature of it. The nature of war for us is it helps the big business. It helps the corporations. It helps the weapons manufacturers. It helps the relationships that we have. Like, how much does it actually help the little guy? Because we're pretty much we've been in a state of war now for what seems like 20 years. It's somewhere, but it doesn't seem to be helping the little guy much, you know.
So before World War One, so World War One is when Britain lost its superpower and the U.S. took over. The reason why they did that is because they devalued the currency to print money to go to war. Before World War One, wars stopped when countries ran out of money. Today, we don't run out of money. So wars don't stop. That's it. But if you really want to look at this, so before John F. Kennedy, we had President Eisenhower. And again, Natasha, go onto YouTube. You can find this. I challenge everyone to do this. Go onto YouTube. Look at President Eisenhower's speech when he left office. It's on YouTube if they haven't taken it down yet.
Oh, about the
President
military-industrial complex or something?
Yeah, exactly. So he warned the United States, the president, as he's leaving office, he had nothing left to protect anymore. He said, look, I'm warning you guys right now. If you don't do something about this in military-industrial complex, they are going to take over the country and ruin the world. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. The next president, John F. Kennedy, goes into office and is on video. Go onto YouTube and watch this for yourself. He says, quote, unquote, I will splinter them into 1,000 pieces, quote unquote. He's dead. These are on video. Go onto YouTube and look it up. This is not conspiracy stuff. So the military industrial complex, they make their money by making bombs, making weapons, making whatever, right? And when we ended the Cold War with Russia in the 80s, the early 90s, they were our enemy for so long. Well, we don't need to have this big military anymore. So imagine if we had an enemy that could never be found, could never be stopped, like this nameless, faceless enemy. Terrorism. Who is it? Like before it was Russia. Okay, we knew it's Russia. They're over there. So anyway,
it's easier to inspire fear with the ghost in the grass. I mean, it's like, yeah.
So
what are your top 3 altcoins? What do you think is going to do well? Not anything but except Bitcoin or Ethereum. What are 3 projects?
I have to phrase. I have to kind of set this up a little bit. So when people say like, what's the best or what's your favorite? Like, what does that really mean, right? So like, as an investor, I buy things for different reasons. Some things I may be like ideological about. Some I believe it has the best opportunity to make money in the next 3 months. Some I believe it has the best opportunity in 5 years. Some because I need that in my portfolio because I'm trying to get into a couple different sectors. So like, just because I think it fits my portfolio really good, my time frame, my breakdowns, et cetera, doesn't mean it works for you. So let me just say that.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So what's the best? I mean, what's the best to make money in the next, by the end of the year? Or what's if I was going to buy 3 that I had to hold for the next 5 years and I couldn't touch them? Right? So those are different answers. If I couldn't use Bitcoin or Ethereum, and that's a tough one, I do think more long term. I think in the shorter term, I like the privacy coins. I was really big with Zcash. I bought it when they really hit hard and they were down in the $50 range. Because they were changing this founders reward. Now all of a sudden and it went up to $100. It doubled pretty quickly. Now Zuku's talking about trying to bring that founders reward back, and the coin's starting to see some problems. But I do think some of the privacy coins, I also really like what Zen Labs Horizon's doing. I think those could be good in the short term. Over the long term, I think most privacy coins kind of go away. So those are more like shorter term plays. If that makes sense. I like some of the DeFi. I'm really into like the DeFi space. I think that's going to be a play because really we're in the collectible stage, which is still speculators investments. So I like stuff that's more around there. I don't believe that we're going to be ready for dApps for quite a while. So I do like some of the projects that are like interoperable pieces. So like Fusion, 0x. I like some of the platform coins like Binance and KuCoin and Huobi Coin. I like those because I believe those are still going to see a pretty good run. So I don't know if that kind of helps out. So privacy coins I like kind of in the short term. interoperable coins, so Link and, like I said, Fusion and stuff like that. I like those for more midterm. At the end of the day, I think everything comes back to Bitcoin.
Aeon.
I really like Aeon. I've done a couple interviews with Matt Spoke, the founder of Aeon.
Have you? Because that SOB keeps telling me, yeah, we're going to, and then I don't hear anything from him for another month.
Yeah, it's been several months since I talked to him. Last I talked to him, I wanted to find out how they were doing through the bear market because, like anybody, they got crushed. But he told me at the time they had like 18 months of runway in front of them, so they're pretty well capitalized. But I like Aeon. So that's kind of what I'm into. As far as I know, everyone talks about Cardano. I know your channel talks a lot about Cardano. I'm starting to.
What's Cardano?
I'm starting to think that there's not a lot of room left in protocol coins. I think that there's first mover advantage, and everything is ERC20 right now, and to try to take that away is going to be very, very, very difficult. Now, Ethereum's got a lot of stuff in their roadmap. I mean, suppose they're going to switch to Ethereum 2.0. Suppose there's POS. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. We're still early on. I think if you look at your portfolio properly and you learn to adjust your portfolio for risk, I think you could say, okay, I'm going to really bet on Ethereum, but I'm also going to take a couple of smaller positions, risk adjusted, in some that I really think could do it, like Cardano, for example. But I mean, come on, they haven't done anything in a couple of years. And like at this point, like the protocol tokens, well, when I say they haven't done anything, right? I mean, you hear about like EOS launching, all these developer funds and all these things on it. And I'm not a fan of EOS, but I'm just saying, like, you hear about that.
Well, what
obviously.
Okay. Well, I hear a lot. So I hear different sides of the fence when it comes to Cardano. And a lot of people say the same thing. Oh, well, how's that going to compete with ERC20? Because that's what everybody's using. What's the best analogy? I mean, I don't know if there is a good analogy, but ERC20 got loaded up with every kind of shitcoin possible. So if 90% of what you are using to kind of establish your foundation is shitcoins, simply for no other reason than you introducing smart contracts to crypto. But then you have something that's significantly better. I mean, typically, they say the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in the back. So,
for sure.
I don't necessarily think that what's happened over the past 2 years is going to mean much in the grand scheme of things when it comes to, all of the questions that Ethereum had, Cardano is preparing to answer. And it is probably taking a little while longer than most people expect, because most people are expecting to see, the next shitcoin launch in 24 hours and then make headlines all over the place because it built a new relationship with the watermelon stand on the corner. So like, I get it, but like, I don't know, man, for whatever reason, I am wholeheartedly, like, in my gut, the core of me is telling me Cardano is going to make significant waves at the end of 2019 and moving through 2020.
Yeah, I think so. For me, what I'd say is, 2 years ago in 2016, I started writing a monthly research newsletter for the crypto space. And back then, the space was a lot different. And even in 2017, and really, I approached investing in the market like a venture capital would. So it's like venture capital economics is what I call it. So a venture capitalist will usually have like a 10-year fund. So they raise their money, and over the first couple of years, they place their money. The next couple of years, they see it develop. And then the last like 2 to 3 years, they're exiting their position. So it's like a 10-year window usually. And what a venture capitalist does is he will typically take that fund and invest it in about 15 to 20 positions. And they know that, a lot of those positions, as a venture capitalist, I'm investing into, private equity, right? And a lot of those companies may never make it to a liquidity place where I can even get my money out. They may never make it public. When I'm investing in this venture capitalist, I'm expecting a lot of that to go to zero because I'll never be able to get my money out if they don't make it. And so when I go into 15, 20 positions, I know several of them will go to zero. Some of them, maybe I'll get some money out, but the couple that do make it will make up for all those other ones, right? So we kind of approached the market like a venture capitalist because we were really early stage in 2016, 2017. and we didn't know. And so it was really about having a diversified portfolio, picking 15, 20 positions and having even position sizing. But today I just feel the market's much more advanced. And so, I believe the way that I look to invest in it is different today. And so the way that I look to invest in it is now like having a risk adjusted portfolio. So like Bitcoin to me seems a lot less risky than a brand new token that just launched in an IEO or whatever, and they don't even have anything built yet, right? And so I need to adjust the amount of risk to my crypto allocation. And so I might have a much larger allocation to Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I still want to play these other moonshots. They have way more upside, like Cardano, for example. If Cardano really hits it like you think it will, it's going to have way more upside potential than Bitcoin today.
Right.
If Bitcoin goes to 20,000, it makes 100% return. Cardano could do a 500% return.
Right.
So I want, but it's also riskier. So I want to adjust it in my portfolio. So I would hold a smaller allocation towards Cardano or some of these other smaller alts because they have way more upside, but they also have way more downs or more risk. And so it's a risk adjusted. And so what I would just encourage everyone to do is to look at your portfolio like that. Make sure you're in for your crypto allocation part, put some into the less riskier stuff, the Bitcoin and Ethereum because they're more proven, but still try to pull some of these moonshots, but make sure it's not going to risk your whole portfolio.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess before we cut it, I mean, hell, I can't believe we've already been on here for over an hour. Tell everybody a little bit about market disruptors, what to expect. What are you doing with that? Just fill everybody in. It's a cool logo.
Yeah. I'd love to. So, my YouTube channel, every week I talk about, I did a 2-part series on, like I said, this whole dollar, world reserve currency shifting over. I talk about why privacy is important and how, Bitcoin, and cryptocurrency can solve that. I talk about, things like that. So it's a lot of, kind of why Bitcoin, why cryptocurrency stuff. And so if you'd love to check me out there on YouTube, just search Mark Moss on YouTube or Market Disruptors. You'll find me there. The podcast, you can search Market Disruptors on iTunes or Google or Stitcher or whatever. And I'm interviewing some of the top investors and builders in the space and try to really ask them the questions that I think that we could learn from. So, how are you approaching the market? Say you're a fund manager, right? Like how are you looking at the market? How are you dividing your assets into different categories? What are you doing to manage your risk? What could the average person do to maximize their returns? Things like that. Or if you're a builder in the space, like what are the challenges? What are the hurdles? How do you manage to find success when you overcome when you find these hurdles? Things like that. So I try to give like actionable stuff that we could all like learn and grow from. So yeah, search Market Disruptors. And I'm on all the social media channels, just #1 Mark Moss.
#1 Mark Moss.
The Mark Moss was taken, so.
Oh, so I just put like, I would just do like real Mark Moss or whatever.
I like the #1 better. It was shorter.
Yeah. Why not? #1. So look, dude, it's always a pleasure. Are you still speaking at Chainwise in November?
Is it still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You didn't know? Shows how good of a job I'm doing updating everybody.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Yeah,
let's do it.
It's November 8th and 9th. So, I actually brought on a guy to really help with a lot of that stuff. So, we're actually starting to get sponsors and we're starting to, pick up things. Dude, I've got so much, like, especially locally, like I've got so much local marketing that's going to like kick off like 3 weeks before the event. Like, television on multiple channels, radio. I'm probably going to end up doing some more billboard. Like there's so much stuff. So, and then the internet and YouTube and people talking about it, I definitely want to get more people talking about it. Yeah, man, I mean, it's and we're not changing the date. Like it is what it is. If Bitcoin's $30,000-$40,000 in November and it's too late for the newcomers that are coming to the convention to buy in on the cheap, well, they'll at least learn about the altcoin market. So let's see what happens.
Let's talk about Bitcoin for a second, where it's going, because I know everybody wants to know about that.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
So everybody always asks me, like, what's your prediction?
I'm putting a dip in. If I put a dip in, we can hang out as long as you want.
Well, let's try and wrap this up in the next 5-10 minutes, but sure. Go ahead and put a dip in. But let's talk about that. So everybody always like wants to ask me like, what's your prediction? Where's Bitcoin going to be next week? Where's it going to be next month? Should I buy now? Should I wait for the pullback? Where's it going to be at the end of the month? All these things. I typically say, I don't know where it's going to be next week. I don't really care where it's going to be next week. Like I'm more concerned where it's going to be in 5 years from now. But at the beginning of the year, and actually if we go back to the end of last year, the stock market was running hot last year. At the end of December, it took a big dip and everyone thought that was the end. And at this point, Bitcoin is still, it hasn't been proven to be a safe haven, a chaos hedge at this point. We don't know if the stock market crashes, will everyone go to Bitcoin? We don't know that. It hasn't survived a crash yet. But anyway, I started putting out information saying, I don't think the stock market is done yet. We haven't seen the signs yet. We haven't seen this blow off top. And so I put out a video on my channel and I said, I think this was in like February or maybe March. And I said, here's how Bitcoin gets to 20,000 by the end of the year. And that obviously got a lot of people like looking at it. But what I said is that I don't try to guess or talk about predictions. What I do is I like to talk about probabilities. This is what the CIA does. So the CIA might go, okay, well, here's two or three things that could happen. This bombing could happen or this terrorist attack could happen. In order for that to come true, here's the things that would happen. In order for this to come true, here's the things. And then you watch the signs and that tells you in probabilities, right? And so I put out a video and I said, here's what could happen. If the stock market holds up, I believe the stock market isn't done yet. I believe the stock market could run up another 30%. And if that happens, I think we could see Bitcoin hit a new all-time high, if not hit 30,000 by the end of the year. However, if this was like in February or March, however, if the stock market starts to fall from here and the stock market crashes, then it negates that, right? So I wasn't like trying to predict it. I was saying if whatever happens here, that's what I think is going to happen. And I said, for the stock market has to hold this level, the NASDAQ is like 2,600, if these things happen. But so far, it's been happening. I said the stock market would go up 30%. We're up like 17, 18%. So like we're there. And if this continues, which it looks like it probably will, I think there's a really good chance we break new all-time high by the end of the year.
I think we break new all-time high by November. But that's my guess. Just looking at the cycles, and just kind of, I feel like there are a lot of people that are still kind of waiting in. And, the YouTubers are a lot smarter now than they were 2 years ago, myself included. And we're very much more aware of what's happening, what has happened, where things are going, It's like every one of these cycles, there are a lot more educated people. And those people are I think this next bull run, whenever it does start, is going to be something to behold, because there are a lot more people in the know now than there was last time. And then there were the time before that. And, we're still, you can see that the gain percentage, I'm still holding to $140,000 Bitcoin in 2020. And
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
In 2020, not this year, but in 2020.
Yeah.
Because,
okay.
I mean, I've done a few videos on it where I've broken down why, and there are so many different roads to that even if all of them performed half as well as I expect them to, it could get absolutely insane. So we might find that.
And when you add in all this macro stuff, like I'm talking about, right? So like the debt and, the currency wars and this new financial system, and you add all that stuff in, I mean, it's like, I tweeted, I said, it's almost like they want us to buy Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, I just think I feel it's a lot easier to predict further out than it is shorter term. Right. I just got this book. It's called The Sovereign Individual. And The Sovereign Individual, and it was recommended by Ari David Paul on Twitter, and it was written in 1997, and they basically in this book forecasted digital money. This is 11 years or 12 years before Bitcoin. They forecasted a digital currency that would take away the government's ability to inflate our money and steal our money away.
There's a
and
guy, I saw a video of a guy who basically predicted it. I can't remember who it was that said it, but this was like 15 years ago, if not more, where he predicted it.
So this
in
is
e-money.
the book Sovereign Individual. I recommend you guys checking stuff out like that. But anyway, my point is that they predicted that 12 years before Bitcoin was even invented, and this was before the internet was even really being used. So my point is, it's easier to predict things further out. It's really hard to predict the shorter term, in my opinion. So in 5 years, in 10 years, it's going to be massive. We can see all the signs, but what we don't know is like timing gets really difficult, and how much longer can they keep these charades up? That's what we don't know. So,
yeah, right now the system's trying to fight it while they're accumulating on the backside. I mean, I have wondered, like, if the government were to just shut the hell up, accumulate Bitcoin passively and quietly, and then turn to support it, how much the growth of Bitcoin over the next 5 years, how much of the national debt could be paid off at profit for the United States?
Well, yeah, definitely. And what we've seen in the past is the United States has actually incentivized the U.S. people to get behind things like this with tax incentives and things like that. So, for example, the U.S. could say, hey, we're going to allow you to write off taxes up to $10,000 that you spend on Bitcoin. So thereby allowing people to invest into Bitcoin tax-free, right? Well, they've done it before. They've done it with real estate. They've done it with things like that. And so if the U.S. got behind it, like you're saying, it could be massive. And one of the reasons why it's hard to understand Bitcoin is because there's so many pieces to it. One of the pieces is game theory. And so there's this game theory. It's a game of musical chairs. There's only so much to go around, and who's going to capture the majority of it, who's going to really take this. And the country that decides to move on it first is going to have a massive advantage.
Which is China right now, which is sad.
The problem with the U.S., the reason why the U.S. can't do it is because the U.S. dollar's the world reserve currency. And it's like they call it, it was actually, I heard this from Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. He calls it the bone in mouth syndrome. Like a dog. I have a bone in my mouth and I see another bone, but I can't get that bone unless I drop this bone.
Isn't he the one that's trying to cover up the fact that he owned Bitcoin and then somebody just outed him? Like he bought Bitcoin in 2013 and then knew all about it, and then like in 2016 or 2017 he started doing American news and he started acting like it was just some stupid thing for gamers.
I saw something like that, but I didn't really read into it to understand what it was. But I did see a clip of him talking to Anthony Pompliano, and he asked Pomp how much money he had in, and Pomp said 50% of my assets are in Bitcoin. And he's like, "What? You got to be kidding me! Nobody ever does that. It's way too much." Which is kind of funny. But
what do you think would happen if the Fed said, "You know what? We'll accept Bitcoin payments to pay down the national debt"?
Well, I mean, we know what would happen. It would make it shoot for the moon, but it can't, and it won't. So imagine this, and we can go back and forth, ping pong around. But in 1913, they decide to create this fake money. It's worth nothing, and at the time, people still thought of gold as money.
Right.
People still thought of gold as money into 1970, but in 1913, let's say, people still thought gold was money, and the government decides to create this fake money. And they said, well, how would we get people to use this? Like, it's fake. Why would anybody use it? What can we do? I have an idea. What we'll do is we'll create the IRS. That was the same year the IRS was invented. We'll create the IRS. And what we'll do is we'll make people work all year to go collect these fake pieces of paper and then bring them to us at the end of the year. You see? We have to work to collect these fake things to give to them at the end of the year. If they took that away, the whole system falls apart. So they can't do it. That's what I'm saying. The U.S. is stuck with this bone in mouth. It can't drop what they currently have to get the next best thing. Other countries can.
Man. All right. Wow.
Interesting side note. So again, right, gold has been money for 5,000 years. Gold was still considered money up until 1970. And in 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard.
Yeah, he's the one that killed it.
He's the one that killed it, right? So what happened is the U.S. in 1944, just super quick, high level, the Bretton Woods Agreement was formed. The U.S. said we're gonna hold everyone's gold, and we're gonna make $35 US for every ounce of gold, and then all the countries will peg to it, and we'll hold all the countries' gold. Well, what happened is the U.S. started printing more money, and the other countries said, "Oh, we know we'd rather just have the gold." So they started coming and just taking the gold. And eventually the U.S. gave up so much gold. That's when Nixon said, enough. We're not giving you your gold back. I know you have the dollars and we're supposed to exchange them for gold, but we're not going to anymore. So that's effectively when the U.S. went bankrupt. That's when they defaulted on their debts. Sorry, we're not going to give you the gold like we said we would. In that year, 1971, the central banks around the world rushed to buy as much gold as they could. Okay. The reason why that's important to know is because last year, the central banks of the world bought more gold last year than any time in history since 1971. Why? Why would they do that? What do they know that we don't know?
That the dollar's going to collapse.
Right? Yeah, right. So that's interesting. And but what I was going to say, what's interesting is Hungary did like this big. So all the central banks own gold. That's how they keep part of their reserves, right? And Hungary did like this big sting on this dark market and got a bunch of Bitcoin. And they're actually sitting on more Bitcoin than gold right now. An actual country, a sovereign country.
Wow.
It's well, like a couple $100 million worth of Bitcoin or whatever, right? But like, dude, if Bitcoin hits $100,000, like Hungary's going to come up, dude.
Right.
Like they're going to be a major player in the world.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man, it's all we need is like 5% of this group, 2% of that group, just everybody to get on board, and this shit's gonna go nuts. I don't know. I just hold and accumulate. I don't even swing trade my Bitcoin anymore. I don't mess with it.
Yeah.
So, all right, 3:37. We've been at an hour and 37 minutes. This is the fastest hour and a half I've spent on YouTube.
Yeah, always fun. Like, I mean, we talked about a lot of things, right? We can go round and round and round for a long time.
We're gonna need to do this again, and then like structure it with a list of every topic we want to go over, because you're like a vault of information. I don't even know where to go to tap into it all. So what we're definitely gonna have to do this again. Some people have been saying they're gonna make you review my exchange and let them know if it's shit or not.
I think it's great. I'm sure you're gonna build a great product.
Yeah, it will be. There's no choice. Like there's no choice whatsoever. Look, Mark, it's definitely always a pleasure. I will make sure that I start reaching out to you on Twitter from now on. I'm not gonna bother on Telegram. So Market Disruptors, guys, check it out. Obviously, Mark's a good guy. For those that don't know, I met him in person in Chicago like forever ago. Just a super chill, super smart guy. And
New York, I think, was the first time we hung out.
Oh, was it New York?
New York,
you're right.
and then in Vegas, and then we got to hang out in Vegas. We've hung out a couple times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I haven't been doing a lot of events. I was going to go to the Futurist event in Toronto next week. It's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But then I got invited to go to the Nakamoto Institute's second annual Bitcoin dinner in Dallas. So I'm going to go to Dallas instead, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't gone to anything. I don't even.
So,
and for whatever reason, my camera that is plugged in just alerted me that it's to change the battery. I don't know if those things go bad or if I just need to unplug and plug it back in.
That means it's time to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going one way or another because it's probably going to shut down until I reset it. But yeah, dude,
always a pleasure, Crow. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, man. We'll see you again real soon. We have to do this kind of thing more often than every quarter.
Yeah, let me know. I always love talking to you.
All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Until next time, guys, crow your coins. We'll see you again soon.
See ya.